On this edition of The Fifth Estate,
he's a nasty, nasty guy. He's a liar.
It may be the ugliest election in U.S. history.
Go back where you come from.
And Donald Trump is the reason why.
Get him out of here.
Get him out. Get him out.
He's playing to the group that feels this should be a white Christian America.
I will build a great, great wall, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
He's built a monster in society right now that he has to feed.
He's selling himself as America's strongman and savior.
The facts don't matter. They can be true or they can be false, as long as they're useful.
One thing is certain, no one breathes fire like Donald Trump.
I'd blow up every single inch.
People are not going to realize what he's accomplished until he's already in the White House.
I'm Bob McEwen. This is The Fifth Estate. January the 20th, 2017. Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C. The swearing in of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It is a day many believed they would never see, and after which the USA may never be the same.
We're going to make America great again.
And it all began here in June 2015, when Donald Trump descended from his penthouse at the Trump Tower in New York City to declare his candidacy for the Republican nomination for president.
You know, all of my life I've heard that a truly successful person, a really, really successful person, and even modestly successful, cannot run for public office. Just can't happen. And yet that's the kind of mindset that you need to make this country great again.
From the start, there was no doubt what the central theme of Trump's election campaign was going to be.
Sadly, the American dream is dead. But if I get elected president, I will bring it back bigger and better and stronger than ever before, and we will make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Immediately, the political bloodletting began. The front page of the New York Daily News depicted Trump in clown face, and the vast majority of pundits mocked his prospects for the presidency.
My theory has always been the UFO theory. The unforeseen will occur. Donald Trump is a perfect example of the UFO theory. And when he first arrived, I didn't think he would get as far as he did.
NBC News at this hour, I'm Tom Brokaw.
For a quarter of a century, Tom Brokaw occupied one of the most influential positions in American life as anchor of NBC Nightly News. The 2017 inauguration will be the 12th of his distinguished career. He admits he's never seen a presidential campaign like this before, thanks to Donald Trump.
First of all, he arrived in the race more famous and richer than any of the other candidates. People overlook that. He was better known in America than any of the other candidates. And the fact that he was rich and could finance his own campaign resonated with people out there. What the American people really want is financial security, and they don't feel they have that anymore. And it had the country half-cocked in the ticked-off position at that point.
Half-cocked and ticked off, as the U.S. has never been before, and that plays right to Donald Trump's unique skill set, according to political writer Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone magazine.
He's not a politician, but he also has this other thing that nobody else has, which is that he's a veteran reality television star who understands in a way that the other politicians don't, that the election is just a reality show, and he's great at it.
You're fired. Bradford, you're fired. You're all fired. All four are fired.
It's more than name recognition from 14 seasons as the star of a hit reality show. The Apprentice showcased Trump as the no-nonsense billionaire boss who knows how to solve problems and make tough decisions, not to mention which buttons to push to create conflict.
Long before Trump entered this whole process, elections became about finding the group of people who are to blame for your problems. And that's how you win elections in America. It's not a secret. Everybody knows this. The thing is, Trump is just really, really good at it.
Donald J. Trump!
And if Donald Trump is a natural at the blame game, his supporters are willing to believe because they may feel cheated out of their rightful slice of the American pie.
They just love what we're doing. We're going to take the country back. We're going to make it great again.
And Trump targeted those about whom many of his supporters had unfavorable feelings already. Blaming terrorism, he set his sights on the world's 1.6 billion Muslims.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
There are basically two news stories about us, and it's no one's fault, but there are. There's the bad story, where we're described as militant, gunman, and terrorist, and then the occasional positive one, where we're described as alleged militant, gunman, or terrorist.
Dean Abdallah is a writer, broadcaster, and stand-up comic in New York who's also an American-born Muslim. He sees Trump as a shrewd businessman who knows his market.
Things have not worked out in their lives. Things have not worked out in a lot of Americans' lives. The difference is, most people don't blame Mexicans or Muslims or the others for their problems.
Abdallah says there is anxiety among American Muslims that Trump's call for a ban would be just the beginning.
There's concern. I mean, I'd say palpable fear, frankly, that it won't end there.
There is a great hatred toward Americans by large segments of the Muslim population.
He needs to give red meat to his base, and that might be next special IDs for Muslims, which he suggested, special registration for Muslims. It could be internment camps.
These are people who only believe in jihad. They have no respect for human life.
And then there's Trump's proposed wall on the Mexican border.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists. We're going to build the wall, okay, believe me. We're going to build the wall.
He loves attention, and one of the things that he discovered very early on in this process is that when he said certain things, he got an overwhelming response, beginning with the thing about Mexicans being rapists. When he said that, it just set off this firestorm on the media.
That goes over well in the heartland, where Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio is a household name for his tough tactics with illegal immigrants. He's endorsed Trump for president and for his wall.
So when you talk about the border, don't just talk about illegal immigration. That wall that he wants to put up pertains to drug smuggling into our country, too.
And for the time being, as a campaign ploy for Trump, it's hitting its target.
Clearly, the race thing, which has been, a millimeter under the surface of American politics for 50 years now, according to sort of the gentleman's agreement of Washington politics, we never really come out in the open and talk about race in this country. It's always by proxy. Suddenly, he has this enormous following of people who, in the past, were only communicating with each other through these very fringy, far-right, KKK-style organizations. Now this is becoming a little bit mainstream.
I think it's as much cultural and racial as anything else. If we had 11 million Canadians coming to America illegally and were working in jobs that Americans really didn't want, people would say, how do we make them citizens? How do we help them through all this? But brown-skinned, Spanish-speaking people don't fit in the idea of what a lot of Americans want for the future of this country, quite honestly.
Mixing race and political incorrectness is nothing new for Donald Trump, and it may well be having an effect. In recent primary polls, 3/4 of his supporters say they are in favor of the proposed ban on Muslims entering the U.S., and Trump has always shown skill at stirring the pot to separate traitors from patriots. He was the point man of the so-called birther movement, challenging President Barack Obama to prove he's a natural-born American and therefore the legitimate president.
I'm very honored to have gotten him to release his long-form birth certificate, or whatever it may be.
It all came to a head in May 2011 at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington. Barack Obama, the guest of honor. Also in attendance, the man questioning his right to be president.
Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
But for the Donald, the needling was about to get much worse.
Donald Trump is here tonight. No one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing? What really happened in Roswell? And where are Biggie and Tupac?
Yeah, the president nailed him on it. I think he was angry. I mean, I think he thought, how dare he take me on? I'm more important.
All kidding aside, obviously we all know about your credentials and breadth of experience.
Indeed, some suggest being the butt of Barack Obama's humor that night may well have triggered Donald Trump's decision to run for the office of president himself. After the break, the making of the would-be president.
Take a look at my next guest. This is Donald Trump, 33 years old.
But once you brought young Donald, this fresh face, then all of the media coverage was focused on this new young star doing this giant project.
How Donald Trump went from this to this.
Get him out of here! Get out! Get him out of here!
Trying to scrape up a down payment for a little fixer-upper in your neighborhood? Take a look at my next guest. This is Donald Trump, 33 years old.
From the beginning, Donald Trump's fame and fortune have been linked, as here in his first appearance on NBC's Today Show in 1980 with Tom Brokaw.
Donald Trump, as I say, is just 33 years old. He took his father's rather modest by current standards real estate empire in Brooklyn and expanded it considerably.
At the time, his signature Trump Tower was rising into the Manhattan skyline.
He now has an apartment for sale in a new Trump building called the Trump Tower, going up on Fifth Avenue. There it is. You can buy this apartment, one floor of it, one whole floor of that building, that is, $11 million altogether. Mr. Trump, what's left in your life? You're 33 years old, you're worth all this money. You say you didn't say that you want to be worth $1 billion.
No, I really don't. I just want to keep busy and keep active and be interested in what I do, and that's all there is to life as far as I'm concerned.
That was over 3 decades ago, and for much of it, the real New York tourist attraction has been Donald Trump himself.
If you walk down Fifth Avenue at any time of day, before all this started, people are over there having their picture taken in front of the Golden Tee. I mean, he is the idea, in many people's minds, of the American dream realized. He's rich and famous and unapologetic about it.
For all his claims of being a self-made man, it was a silver spoon that got him launched. Trump's father, Fred, had amassed a $200 million fortune building housing in the outer boroughs of New York City. When his son entered the business, Fred was there to help.
He guaranteed the financing. He brought him to his own bankers to get the $35 million loan that started the whole process. And Fred had to guarantee the loans.
New York investigative journalist Wayne Barrett wrote the first probing feature on Manhattan's new young real estate mogul. Then, in 1992, an unauthorized biography. At the time, Trump was facing bankruptcy, and he threatened to sue Barrett, then had him arrested at one of his casinos. Barrett says Trump's first projects in Manhattan cost hundreds of millions of dollars, the financing arranged by his dad. Before long, the son became the brand.
But once you brought young Donald, this fresh face, then all of the media coverage was focused on this new young star doing this giant project.
But there always were controversies. According to Barrett, Trump associated with known members of organized crime, both while starting out in New York and then building his casinos in Atlantic City.
So, yeah, he had, everywhere Donald went, he had these mob allies and friends.
And another event early in Trump's career follows him still. When he handled rentals for his father's housing in New York, the Federal Justice Department accused them of trying to keep out minority tenants, especially blacks. Eventually, the Trumps signed an agreement not to discriminate. But the taint of racial animus has wafted over Donald Trump ever since, even at his televised roast.
Donald say he wants to run for president and move on into the White House. Why not? It wouldn't be the first time you pushed a black family out of their home.
Amazing! Amazing!
It's no laughing matter, and there continue to be allegations about Trump's racism. For example, this tweet that 81% of white American homicide victims are killed by African Americans. It's blatantly untrue. In fact, none of these other supposed facts are true. And at Trump rallies, racial tension seems to be just under the surface. That is, until it boils over. Each event begins with an ominous kind of public service announcement.
And the PA announcer before the event basically tells the audience, if somebody gets up and starts causing a scene, if there's a protester in the middle of the event, please do not touch or harm the protester. And they actually instructed us to just circle the person, shout Trump, Trump, Trump at the person, and wait for security to escort that person out.
Trump, 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 Trump.
But the eviction process is rarely that orderly.
Get him out of here! Get out! Get him out of here!
At this Trump speech in Alabama, a Black Lives Matter protester is punched and kicked. Trump suggests he was asking for it.
And this guy started screaming by himself. And they did, I don't know, rough up. Maybe he should have been roughed up because it was absolutely disgusting what he was doing.
Georgia, police evict African-American students from a Trump rally on their own college campus.
Get him out! Get him out!
I think we got kicked out because we're a group of black people. And I guess people, what's going on in America, they're afraid we're gonna say something or do something.
Louisville. A young African-American woman is attacked by a Trump supporter known to be a white supremacist.
Throw him out!
Yeah, it happens at almost every one of his events. It's sort of this ritualistic cleansing of the audience. I mean, if you want to think about it, in conjunction with the things that he said about minorities and immigrants and that sort of thing, it has pretty powerful connotations.
I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks.
It's especially so when Donald Trump himself threatens the violence, as when a protester interrupted this rally in Nevada.
And he's walking out, and we're not allowed, you know, the guards are very gentle with him. He's walking out like big high fives, smiling, laughing. Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
I love it when he says he wanted to punch a protester in the face. He's never been in a fight in his life. I'll bet you he wouldn't know how to fight. You know, he calls other people pussies. But please, Donald, you know, he'd go wash his hands if he shook your hand.
In this campaign, the violence and vulgarity seem to be hallmarks of Trump rallies alone. And he doesn't appear to discourage them. In fact, the ugliness has only been getting worse.
Light the motherfucker on fire!
You look at also the cult of personality that's developing around this guy. You don't have to just fear Trump. You have to fear the types of people that are attracted to Trump.
Rick Wilson is no pacifist. He's a pro-gun mainstream Republican strategist who says he's dismayed by Donald Trump's campaign. He claims his election would be a recipe for disaster.
If Trump becomes the nominee and Trump becomes the president by some horrible turn, the Trump base will want action. They will want results. And we've already seen the sort of raw edges of this thing and the preview of Trump's America at some of these rallies that has become sort of a hallmark of the get him out, I want to punch that guy in the face, and not a thing without, that shouldn't concern people about the psychology of mobs and crowds, because that's what Trump is very skillfully manipulating and exploiting.
Tell me, isn't it fun to be at a Trump rally? Isn't this fun?
When we return.
And I'm a leader. I've always been a leader. I've never had any problem leading people. If I say do it, they're going to do it.
Trump, the savior.
I brought my Bible. Okay?
He has created this reality TV figure who is this strongman savior who has come to rescue everybody out there in the heartland.
I would bomb the shit out of him.
How far will he go? Just watch it.
I'd blow up every single inch. There would be nothing left.
Whatever you believe about Donald Trump's presidential timber, he already has the aircraft for the job. The Trump Boeing 757 is every bit as sleek as Air Force One, and even more luxurious, with fixtures and seat belts of 24-karat gold. It is just one of the trappings of the Trump campaign. Call him alpha male or egomaniac. He's obviously convinced that he alone is uniquely qualified to be America's chief executive. Veteran broadcast journalist Tom Brokaw.
He can't believe that not everyone shares his values. I mean, that he thinks this is the way the world is happiest. And a lot of people do. A lot of people do want to be rich and famous with good reason. They look at him and think, oh my God, you know, what a life. I was in Iowa when the Trump plane arrived, Trump on the side. It was carried live on local television. It was like a scene out of a James Bond movie. You know, it was so dramatic, and you could just see people saying, God, this guy's a big deal. So everything he does is kind of orchestrated and has a theatrical quality about it.
Trump uses his independent wealth to portray himself as the honest broker, not beholden to special interests, an outsider primed to take on the corrupt Washington establishment.
I don't need anybody's money. It's nice. I don't need anybody's money. I'm using my own money. I'm not using the lobbyists. I'm not using donors. I don't care. I'm really rich.
It's the role that Donald Trump plays both on screen and off, according to writer Matt Taibbi.
He has created this reality TV figure who is this strongman savior who has come to rescue everybody out there in the heartland. His version of events is essentially that he's a whistleblower who has come to protect everybody. Like, I know how this system works because I've been part of it. I've seen how rotten it is, so trust me.
I wanna be like the Donald Trump.
Think 21st century folk hero, the billionaire Robin Hood celebrated in songs online, and every corner of American culture.
And the next President of the United States, Mr. Donald J. Trump!
Trump's supporters want and expect the authoritarian, anti-establishment president he's promised to be, according to Brooke Gladstone of National Public Radio.
A daddy who can take care of all the problems. And I think that they see that in Donald Trump.
Wow, thank you. So fantastic. Well, you know, I love Ohio. I have a long history with Ohio.
But a strong man needs an enemy, someone or something to overcome, or better yet, obliterate.
You ready for a commander-in-chief who will let our warriors do their job and go kick ISIS ass?
I would bomb the shit out of him.
NPR's Brooke Gladstone argues that by appealing to prejudice and fear, Trump is fulfilling the dictionary definition of a demagogue.
Donald Trump is a true demagogue. The facts don't matter. They can be true or they can be false. He doesn't care as long as they're useful. It doesn't seem that his supporters care much about his positions. All they talk about when I hear people interviewing them on the street is that he's strong and that he can make deals.
Welcome to a kingdom where everybody's treated like a king.
She says in the fictional kingdom of Trump, his perceived strength is often based on misimpression or lies, like the so-called success of his casinos.
You can say, well, you know, he did go bankrupt. You know, he's not self-made. He got $1 million loan from his father. He messed up the casinos in Atlantic City, and all these buildings with his name on it in the United States are owned by foreign powers, a lot of which are in the Middle East. None of that seems to really matter.
Trump, the strong man, allies himself with others who are strong, quoting Mussolini, flattering Vladimir Putin.
He's actually liked in his country, which is hard to believe, because he's essentially a dictator. And I think he has an 80% approval rating, which, you know, any politician in this country would love to have.
Now we're talking about waterboarding.
Strong men also talk tough, pressed about the legality of torturing terror suspects, even killing their families. Trump said this about the generals who would report to him as commander-in-chief.
And I'm a leader. I'm a leader. I've always been a leader. I've never had any problem leading people. If I say do it, they're going to do it.
And every strong man, especially a U.S. presidential candidate, better have a gun. What else could explain why Trump's Republican opponent, Senator Ted Cruz, a man running for the world's most powerful office, would do this? Wrapping bacon around an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, firing off a few hundred rounds until it's cooked just the way he likes it. Crispy.
Machine gun bacon.
Trump used the Paris terror attacks to tout his pro-gun credentials, explaining the massacre like this.
So, prior to Paris, which was a disaster, which, by the way, If some of the people in those places where it was slaughter, absolute slaughter, had guns, you wouldn't have had the carnage that you had in Paris. You wouldn't have had that carnage.
Bibles and guns brought us here.
And in America today, it's an article of faith that strength comes from within. So every presidential candidate must be a man or woman of God.
I brought my Bible.
Faith is also a campaign prerequisite for Donald Trump.
You know, it's First Presbyterian Church, Jamaica, and this was written by my mother with my name, it's a long time ago.
Investigative journalist and Trump biographer Wayne Barrett.
In all of your research, over all those years, did you encounter a strong bent of Christianity in his life?
It's a total fraud. It's a total fraud. Look.
You're not questioning his faith.
I saw that interview once where he said, well, I go on Easter and I go on Christmas, and then he's sort of scratching his head and said, oh, and Sundays. Sometimes I go on Sundays, you know. I mean, please.
Whether you think he's a sincere Christian or not, evangelicals are increasingly among the millions of middle-class Americans flocking to the Donald.
On your feet, stand up tall. Freedom's on our shoulders. USA!
We won with highly educated. We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
Despite him saying, I love poorly educated, which he said the other night, the reality is he's probably never had a conversation with anybody, of the class that he's giving speeches to now in his life before this year. I mean, he hangs around with models and sports stars and politicians and other billionaires. That's his crew.
They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Indeed, Trump's appeal has expanded far beyond his original base of angry white males who may feel left behind by U.S. elites.
Now, we've kind of hit a ceiling on the American dream. Those people have been out there unhappy, with good reason, about how America's been governing itself. We have a Congress that is the worst I've ever seen, Democrat and Republican. They can't be seen saying hello to each other on either side.
Tom Brokaw says there's anger in America, a feeling of betrayal by government, especially in Washington. And Donald Trump has drilled deep down into it.
What the American people really want is financial security, and they don't feel they have that anymore. And that's a huge issue that no one is addressing in a forensic way. How do we change that? So Donald Trump gave voice to their anger. And now there is the possibility that he can get the nomination, A, and B, get elected. It still is a long shot, it seems to me, but we have been surprised one time after another in the last 9 months.
When we come back, what frightens even Republicans.
Do you want to give an entertainer and a showman with poor impulse control, a vengeful streak, and a vicious temper control of 7,700 nuclear weapons?
January 21st, 2017. The morning after the inauguration, the first full day of the presidency of Donald J. Trump. In the Oval Office, the 45th President of the United States gets to work. But what's on the to-do list of a man presumably elected because the American public is so furious at everyone else? Legendary broadcaster Tom Brokaw has seen presidents come and go. He says none faced a learning curve like Donald Trump.
I don't think he really has a full appreciation of just how complex that job is. It's the hardest job in the world, by far. And it's not just being the public face of the White House. You've got to be in there with your hands on the gears. You've got to have a smart national security and foreign policy and economic policy that plays across America, not just to one segment of or another.
That degree of difficulty would be compounded by the expectations of Trump's base, who put him in the White House. If he's played the race card, they'll be counting on him to follow through with action.
Well, he's playing to the group that feels, that this should be a white Christian America, that Muslims are responsible for all the difficulties that we have just because there were Muslims involved in the bombing of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. That all Muslims are guilty in some fashion.
The U.S. has become a dumping ground for everybody else's problems. Thank you.
I mean, I can't imagine any circumstances under which, if he were president of the United States, he wouldn't try to build the wall, wouldn't try to deport millions of Latinos.
Investigative journalist and author Wayne Barrett predicts as president, Trump would attempt to fulfill his promises. The wall, the Muslim ban, deportations.
It's going to be extraordinarily ugly. I mean, imagine massive deportations in this country. But I think he's going to try to do that.
And there are fears about foreign policy, the likelihood of a trade war with China, and his threat to rip up the nuclear agreement with Iran have fellow Republicans running scared.
Never, ever, ever in my life have I seen any transaction so incompetently negotiated as our deal with Iran.
His opponents in the party desperate to build a wall between themselves and Trump.
Mr. Trump's bombast is already alarming our allies and fueling the enmity of our enemies.
There are other people in our party who actually are kind of horrified by Donald Trump. I'm one of them.
Guys, we have a con artist as the front runner in the Republican Party.
Once you're president, you have this awesome and terrible responsibility to actually be president. You're not a show host anymore.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
You have to run a government, run a country. I think his judgment is so terrible.
I want a general where we knock the hell out of him, fast.
It's going to be a disaster on every front.
Mainstream Republican strategist Rick Wilson believes the presidency of Donald J. Trump would destroy the Republican Party and severely damage the U.S.
It's going to wreck the American economy in ways that it's going to reverberate for decades. He wants to feed that monster he's built, and he's going to try to do it. It's going to be nearly impossible. It's going to cause enormous disruption.
Disruption is a theme at Trump rallies.
Oh! Get him out! Get him out!
Their exercises in demagoguery.
You ain't gotta grab him like that. You ain't gotta grab him like that.
Calculated to target not just protesters, but also to control the media, who he sees as the enemy. And they're verbally flogged by Trump to the cheers of his crowd.
By the way, I hate some of these people, but I'd never kill them. I hate them. No, these people, I would never kill them. Let's see. No, I wouldn't.
He's vowed to clamp down on freedom of the press.
If I become president, oh, do they have problems? They're going to have such problems.
Republican Rick Wilson worries what more Donald Trump could do with all of the power of the Oval Office.
We're looking at this guy who is a great entertainer and a great showman, but do you want to give an entertainer and a showman with poor impulse control, a vengeful streak, and a vicious temper control of 7,700 nuclear weapons?
I love you. I love you, folks. Thank you.
Since he declared his candidacy, most assumed there would come a tipping point for Trump, when someone would trip him up, or he'd trip himself, It's what Tom Brokaw thought.
I keep thinking that there is a breaking point, but there seems not to be. I mean, the Republicans are either running for cover or holding their head in their hands or saying, what the hell are we going to do if we get this guy as the nominee? These vulgarisms that he engaged in at any other time in American political life would have been a kind of knife in the heart of the candidate. But we have changed, and part of it is the culture of America.
Which is why this has been one of the most extraordinary episodes in American politics. The woman hoping to make history in the White House is now in for a vicious fight.
People ask me all the time, well, who do I want to run against? That's not for me to decide. But given what they've all said, I will take any one of them.
The billionaire who's somehow surrogate for the little guy. His party running against its own presumptive nominee. The vulgarity and half-truths seen as candor and a fresh voice. Blame it all on the establishment. Credit a clever strategy. Or call it a perfect political storm.
It's brilliant in a lot of ways what he's done. He's manipulated the entire political and media system. It's like any good long con, you know, everybody's gone from the scene by the time you realize you lost your money. That's what it's going to be like with Trump. People are not going to realize what he's accomplished until he's already in the White House.